Good evening and welcome to the Kellogg Venture Capital Panel. I'm Susie Taharian. I'm delighted to be your moderator this evening. Before we start, I want to introduce our host. Plug and Play Tech Center has been great and they've really been accommodating for us for this event. And I just want to thank them. And also, hopefully as you walked in, you browsed around a lot. This is a great facility for entrepreneurs and a great resource for venture capitalists. So I'm making a little plug for them. This is Zorko Melati. And Zorko, so would you like to say a quick welcome?
Thank you so much. I would like to say hi on behalf of Plug and Play. Plug and Play is currently the largest high-tech center in the Valley. We have around about 350 startups here in this facility, and in the other two in Palo Alto and Rebel City. Across all the stages of growth, mostly very early. We are also helping our startups obviously accelerate and grow, and one of the services that we have is we are putting startups in touch with our venture capital partners. It's around about 180 VC firms that are currently screening startups here at the Plug and Play. It's daily for 1 to 5 of them. And it's about 150 corporations, out of which at least half of them they have their venture arms and would be either looking at investing, doing business, or acquiring our startups. Huge community, starting with PayPal some 15 years ago, over Google that grew from 3 to 50, up to today's popular startups, as you probably know, Dropbox, Voodoo that got acquired by Walmart, Zeus, etc. So we are delighted to have you here, and whenever you have more interest and would like to learn a little bit more about Plug and Play, please let us know. We would like to give you a tour at any of the events in future, so feel free to contact us. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. And they really have taken care of us, so really appreciate it. Thank you. Of course, the other big sponsor this evening is Kellogg, so they're delighted to have this event go forward. I think a lot of us in the crowd are Kellogg alumni. I'm also from Kellogg. I graduated class of 1995. And I'm a Bay Area native, so I was delighted after a couple of years in Chicago winters to come back to Bay Area. And at the time, it seemed like there was a handful of us Kellogg folks in Silicon Valley. I'm very pleased that since then the number has really swelled. We're now at about 2,800 Kelloggians in Silicon Valley. We've become quite a significant presence in Silicon Valley. We are marketers and financiers, we're investment bankers and consultants, and we're also entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. Tonight I want to focus on the venture capitalists and the entrepreneurs that they fund and support. This evening's intent, the genesis of this evening, was to highlight the great tradition of venture capital that Kellogg has in Silicon Valley. Kelloggans seem to be drawn to the entrepreneurial spirit of Silicon Valley. The VCs are here, the innovative ideas are here, the entrepreneurs are here. To give you some numbers, get a flavor for that. In 2011, there was $29 billion of VC investments in the U.S. $15 billion of it was in California. So California had more venture capital investment than all the rest of the other states combined. So the innovators and the entrepreneurs are here. And the VCs are also here. There's about $8 billion of investments in the U.S. done by venture capitalists in California. And most of that money is here in Silicon Valley. So, not surprisingly, most of the VCs in California funded entrepreneurs and startups in California, about $6 billion. That's money that was essentially flowing between Sand Hill Road and San Jose. And that's why we have so much traffic, right? These investments have had a significant impact on the global economy. In 2011, VCs invested $29 billion in about 3,752 deals in the U.S. The impact of that was about 11% of the private sector jobs come from venture capital-backed companies. 11% of the jobs. And contribute significantly to the economy, so something like 22% of the U.S. GDP comes from companies that were venture capital-backed firms. And these startups become quite successful, become global, and they become essentially U.S. ambassadors of productivity and creativity around the world. And you've heard of a few of them. Some of them are Amazon, Apple, Cisco, Costco, which is a venture-backed firm, eBay, FedEx, Google, Home Depot, Intel, Starbucks, and lots of others that you've heard of. I was personally really interested in this evening because I wanted to learn how do venture capitalists identify these future success stories. I'm not a venture capitalist. I spent 15 years working with Chevron, financing and investing in global energy ventures. We looked at companies that had hard assets, that had proven track records, in an established industry with detailed financial data. And I thought those were tough decisions. When I left Chevron and joined a renewable energy startup, we started working with venture capitalists to get funding. And I realized what a difficult position you guys are in. Not a lot of history, not a lot of financial detail, and a very uncertain future, battling against very entrenched players in the established industry. So hopefully our panelists this evening can shed some light on how they go about looking and finding those future success stories based on the limited amount of information and huge amount of uncertainty that they see. So I'm looking for the answers, guys. We're fortunate to have a really great panel with us this evening. These guys are all Kellogg alum. They're all venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, and we're very fortunate to be here with us this evening. I'll start with having the panelists introduce themselves so you can learn a little bit about them and the firms they represent. And then I'll ask some questions to get the ball rolling and certainly open it up to you and really welcome you to ask questions. I've asked them to be very candid and open, and hopefully you'll take advantage of that opportunity. With that, we'll start and have our panelists introduce themselves. Okay, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name's David Heaney. I'm a Kellogg JD MBA from 2011, so very new to the venture capital scene. I joined a firm called TomorrowVentures after graduating, taking a step back. Before school, I worked in investment banking in New York for Merrill Lynch, covering mainly financial institutions, but also a lot of financial technology companies, before moving to a private equity, growth equity firm in Houston, Texas, where I'm from originally, called Platform Partners. And I hesitate on the private equity, growth equity, because we did a little bit of traditional private equity, but we also did a lot of investing into companies with kind of 50 to 80 million of revenue, where the founder had either reached the end of their vision or the end of their ability to execute on it. And we would partner with them, they would always stay and help them address one of those two issues. And I quickly found that what I really enjoyed and liked was thinking about the growth and strategy and marketing and operations as opposed to the pure finance side. And TomorrowVentures, as a early stage venture capital firm, gave me the opportunity to really focus on those things I enjoy. We primarily do seed and Series A deals and invest anywhere from about $100,000 up to $3 million in a given round. We are a little bit more flexible than many because we have one LP. All of our money comes from Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google. And while he's not involved day to day, it does give us the flexibility to look at a bunch of different types of opportunities, which I can go in a little bit later. So I think that's a quick overview of me.
Great. Well, I'm George Bischof, and this will be a good panel because I'm the opposite of David. First of all, I graduated in 94, not 11. I work for a late-stage venture capital firm. So I spent about 10 years in tech investment banking at Robertson Stevens, taking companies public, and had wanted to get in the venture business. Actually, while I was at business school, I think seeing a lot of the craft presentations kind of wanted me to steer back to the Bay Area. And finally, in 2000, the industry kind of opened up, and as a banker, I was able to get a seat at the table, joined a firm called Bacchus Ventures, spent 8.5 years there, and joined Meritech a little over 4 years ago. Meritech's, as I said, a late-stage firm. We're investing in companies that are about 10 plus million in annualized revenue or more. So a little bit different than the vast majority of venture firms, which are truly starting up companies. We have a little over $2.5 billion under management. We have 5 partners based in Palo Alto. Some of the companies that people are familiar with that we've invested in are Salesforce, Facebook, a lot of the infrastructure side, companies like Fortinet, Riverbed, Netezza, and Fusion.io. Those aren't necessarily cocktail party names. So on the consumer side, companies like Evernote, Zulily, PopCap Games, which did Bejeweled, Plants vs. Zombies, Zipcar, just to name a few.
All right, I'm Tod Francis. Out of Kellogg, I went into consumer marketing. I love the consumer side of things, so I spent 10 years in operating roles starting at Johnson & Johnson. It's not a normal background in venture. In fact, I don't know if anybody else in venture has a packaged goods background. So I did 10 years operating roles, and I went into Trinity Ventures and was there for 10 years. And we invest in consumer companies like Starbucks and Jamba Juice, P.F. Chang, Blue Nile, a lot of neat companies like that. And then I started focusing on internet and consumer, and the boom happened, the crash happened, and nobody wanted to touch internet or consumer. And so I was out on my own, and we decided to start a firm because we believed that eventually technology would move towards consumers. And so we started a new firm, Shasta Ventures. So I guess I did my little part of entrepreneurship and getting this thing going. It was really exciting to do that. Probably my best memories in the workforce. And so we're on our third fund. We've raised something like $700 million over the 3 funds. And we do early stage investing. So we invest in anywhere from seed companies to $100,000 into classic Series A is what we really like, a $3 or $4 million round going in. It's typically a few people and an idea, a website, and a few users. And then we'll also invest at the Series B round. So we love what we do. We focus on consumer internet, mobile, and then software services.
Cool. My name is Quinton Jay. I'm a class of '96 grad. I run a niche fund just specifically for the wine industry. So these guys are a little bit bigger. But so we're about 40 million. So we're not in the billions, but it's I tell people it's 40 million than I got. So it's actually kind of a good start. It's actually funded by a gentleman by the name of Sam Brock and his family used to own Seagram's. He's a billionaire, so I guess he's got 40 million or some seed money to kind of help us, and we were able to kind of round out our fund by high net worth individuals and a few institutional investors like Travelers, W.J. Deutsch, Anheuser-Busch, so, but if you get one anchor guy, you kind of got your first sort of fund sort of there. We're a latter stage fund, so, if you got a couple grapes and a wine, I probably can't talk to you, but if you have a great brand that actually needs a little bit of growth capital, I'm the guy to talk to, right? So the fund is actually divided into 2 pieces. We do a debt portion, and then we also do truly private equity, which is actually the equity itself. So the debt piece is actually second lien loans behind the seniors. So let's say your bank says, you know what, man, no more money for you, but you've got a great idea, you come talk to me. So it's been interesting. My background prior to that, I ran wineries for the last 10 years prior to that. So I've been at the fund for 2.5 years. I ran wineries, Artesa, Bonnie Doon, Referred to, worked for the Huneas, who's also a Kellogg grad. Before that, I was at the Coca-Cola company for 4 years, went to Kellogg, and then before that, I was in banking. So I was able to kind of close the loop with this job because I was able to tell them, listen, they haven't changed discounted cash flows. Accounting now has some, Sarbanes-Oxley, so we're really safe now. And so guess what? I'm your guy. And it's really interesting because most of the guys that are in the fund are finance guys, right? I mean, they don't have operating backgrounds. So we'll have discussions and we'll be like, well, what happens if the thing collapses? Well, I'll run it for you. How's that sound? And they'll be like, well, how do you run it? And I was like, well, it's really simple. The grapes grow, we harvest them, we turn them on, and they're like, wow, this is, but you sure you want to do that? I go, listen, I've done it 4 times with different companies. That's the big piece. So we're a smaller fund, we're a niche fund. So I think that they're looking for different people, different backgrounds. I think they're really looking for Kellogg people, to be honest, because we're quick, we're nimble on our feet, right? I mean, I'll tell you a crazy story, but I'm working on a deal for 9 months. The guy decided Monday to tell me he was a felon. Well, actually, he didn't tell me. I found out in the background check. I was like, so it's an interesting sort of shtick. So anyway.
So we have a great panel, early stage, late stage, a variety of different sectors. So you've done a really good, broad spectrum of views and perspectives. With that, let's start asking some questions. We did a survey before the event. We realized that most of our folks in the audience are not experts on venture capital. So we thought we'd start with just giving you a little bit of explanation of how the business works. So I thought one of the first questions is, how do entrepreneurs approach you? Do they come up to you in panels like this or business plan competitions? Do they send you an email? What's a good way for entrepreneurs to approach you just to get started?
I'll go first. Usually deal flow comes in a couple different ways. One is through your service providers. So they're usually your bankers, your lawyers, and stuff like that. And usually they kind of vet it so they don't give you the crazy people. But there are some crazy people that call us too, right? I mean, they're like, hey, I saw that you're a venture fund, and we need a little bit of wine, we need some money, and and I have some grapes, and you're like, okay, and it's just my personality that I just think that I should listen to everybody. I'll give you 10, 15 minutes of my time. I really will. And if you've got the time to call me, I've got 15 minutes to talk to you back. And I can know within 15 minutes if I can do a deal with you or not. I'll ask you how big you are, what's where you're distributed. I've got my list of questions because I'm an operator, right? I can kind of know where you're at. So deal flows for me come from both the service providers and a few of the kind of like, wow, this guy just called me and it sounds interesting. And there's kind of a midsection where I do a lot of events like this. I mean, I did one over at this one called, I don't even know what the group's called. It's called Accelerated Something Growth, right? I mean, it was like a offshoot of FANG, Financial Executive Network Group, right? And as you know, I got a deal out of it. The guy called me up. He goes, listen, I'm a guy that's helping this guy with the winery. They're doing 80,000 cases. They're out in Lodi. There's no way in hell I would have been in Lodi. I'll just tell you that much, right? You know what I mean? But the deal's coming my way, and potentially we might be doing it. So that's kind of where we found deals.
It might be a little different in the tech world because it's such a broad range of companies and geographies and people. I think that I'd rather flip it around and maybe say what is a good way to approach a venture person to get a higher likelihood of attention. And if you put yourselves in the shoes of somebody who's receiving hundreds of emails a week from entrepreneurs and realize that it's hard to get back to everyone in a personal nature like we would want to, I think the best thing to do is you research the firm, you understand what your business is, find a firm that is focused in that area, and get an introduction. I don't know that, I would bet that George or our firm, I don't know about Tomorrow, you're a little bit earlier, has ever invested in someone who hasn't had some kind of introduction to the firm in some manner. And so that's what I would encourage you to do, is find a way to just get a friendly introduction and know that you're talking to somebody who's focused in your sector. It's really weird when I get software healthcare investments, is because I don't do healthcare. Our firm doesn't do healthcare. There's nothing on our website that says it. So just spend your time efficiently, target people, and try to get a warm introduction would be my advice.
Yeah, that just reinforced that. I don't think we've ever invested in a company that just was a random cold call into us. But right now, there's so many great ways of establishing a relationship, even if you don't know somebody who could get in with a friend. So, I've seen people use LinkedIn, Twitter. These days, you know which conferences people may be at, so you can count them after a panel or something like that. And so there are a variety of ways of making, creating that relationship and, kind of forcing serendipity.
Not much to add to that, other than I think the real goal was to show relevancy. It's why are we a good fit, and to get that point across really early, because of all the emails and incoming proposals, that there's really not a lot of time, despite our desire to be able to look at everything. It's how quickly can you get across that this is relevant, something we should spend more time on.
That's great. These two questions I was going to ask. Give us an idea of the deal flow. How many pitches do you get? How many proposals do you see in a week? How many of those do you actually get funded? Just to get an idea of the traffic flow.
So we've got 5 partners, and I, tried to ask people, because it was a topic you said you might cover, and so, people said that they easily got more than a lead a day. But if you really looked at kind of quality, pre-scrub, qualified things that hit our sweet spot, it's probably 2 a week per person, so 500 a year for our firm that we feel like hits the sweet spot. And then we invest in about 6 to 10 of them a year. Probably put term sheets out on twice that number.
I think that's the general stat, is 1 to 3% of the companies that you interact with go forward with.
Then here's the question I really want to ask is, what do you look for? What are the sort of 5 critical things you look for? How do I find the next Google? Help me with that. Is it an entrepreneur? Is it?
I think it's all about the teams. I know it's been said before, but I just think great teams are the difference, because you can be in a big market. Great teams in a big market. In other words, a relevant market that if you're successful, you can have a good outcome. Because you can be in a big market with an almost good team and miss the opportunity. And most companies dodge and weave, I guess the term today is pivot. And the smart teams figure out how to do that well, and the smart teams figure out how to end up in the right spot, and the almost good teams say, we had that idea, but just don't quite get there. So because we do early stage, we have very little to look at. You actually get to look at numbers and revenue and all that stuff. We're looking at 3 people in a room with an idea. So maybe that's why we're much more focused on our instinct on the team. The second thing we look for is customer product fit. Are they product oriented? Can they deliver a better customer experience through technology than the way it's currently being done? And we're very biased that way in our firm. And again, we're looking at things early stage. So we look at the team, hope it's a good, sizable market, and then their instinct and their development of the product and how they're serving the customer.
And as a late stage, and you could be the same way, Quinton, in terms of we look at products, team, and market. But then, in addition, there's a lot of data. These companies have been around for a while. They're doing 10 plus million in revenue. So we really look at quality of traction. Is the customer base diversified? Is it concentrated within just a few customers? We're looking for hyper growth. On top of that, we also have to worry about valuation, we're paying much higher prices than Tod gets to pay. So in some ways, the bar has to be higher, and we have to check all those boxes. Early stage guys can find an excellent entrepreneur who's done it before. Unfortunately, we can't, bet just on the guy, or when we're trying to figure out, what's the next step at the prices we're paying.
Dave, what do you look for?
So, I think what Tod said for early stage is spot on. The team is number one in a big market because there's so much you can't predict very much. So that's what you can look at. I think one thing that's worth thinking about from an entrepreneur's perspective is while every VC firm will say those two things and look at the team very hard, I think different VC firms tend to gravitate towards different characteristics of the team. Some early stage VC firms really value the technical ability over a long list of other characteristics. Some really value a second-time entrepreneur. Some really value, and I think this is something we pay a lot of attention to, knowledge and relationships in the market. Do you really know the customer? Do you know what they need? And we value that as a firm, but if you go talk to someone else, maybe that's third or fourth on their list.
There's probably a couple things. One is definitely just the echoing of the team. Right? There's a deal that we did that we were all kind of on the fence on. It's one of the deals that we have. His name's Cameron Hughes. And literally this guy built an entire negotiation business where he just buys bulk wine from somebody, goes to Costco and sells it. And literally the guy built it when we got there. He was at 100,000 cases. And I was like, wow, holy smokes. By the time, and I was walking in the Costco somewhere, and I saw him in the corner of my eye, and he was selling wine, and I was watching him. And I go, any guy who's on here on a Saturday afternoon, pouring wine, and telling people to sell, and you're just watching his growth, I said, that's the guy that we got to back, right? The other way of potentially doing it is looking at scores, right? I mean, depending on kind of what type of wine that you're selling, what sort of market, if it's a luxury product, it's score-based driven, right? So if you look at a Sabraja, one of the deals that we did, this guy's got more 90-plus point wines than any other winemaker dead or alive. I'm going to do well. I just have a good feeling about it. So it's a little bit about the team, a little bit about, and definitely about good wine. But then if you look at sort of wine, it's grown, it's actually grapes. So is he a good viticulturist? Is he out there in the vineyards? Is he kind of looking at, where the base product comes from? After he does it, what does he do with it? He's a great winemaker, right? He just knows his art and craft. He's been doing it for 32 years. He did it for Behringer and made a bunch of 90-plus point wines. So he's going to be making it. Is he sellable in the market? Do you like him? Right? Is he doing a winemaker dinner? Do you want to actually be there? Do you want to join his wine club? After he's done, you just got to go, you know what? I love this guy. I got to have him. You know what? I don't care if you're going to charge my credit card $200 every 3 months because I want your wines. I want to say that I met you before. Right? So it's these sort of buckets that all of a sudden you kind of say, this is a winner right here. So that's how we kind of take a look at the different deals.
Just quick follow-up.
Yeah.
So for these guys, do you think, Tod and David, that most early stage firms are mostly team focused? I just remember, there have been some quotes from some esteemed early stage venture players saying, always bet on market because you can always change the team. It's that chicken and egg kind of question.
I think that's changed. If you look at the great outcomes, and history. The founding culture, the founding team is still with the company at the time of outcome. So I think we look for passionate entrepreneurs who have a unique view into a customer need, and they may not be the CEO during that high growth stage, but they're with the company. And you can, we can just name all the companies. Whether it be Apple, going back as far back as Apple, or Microsoft, or even the current companies, Facebook and whatnot, they're Starbucks. The founders are with the company. So we do pay a lot of attention. We don't take the attitude of we'll just change them out. We'd rather see that person be the driver of a new vision, a new culture, and hope they make it a little way in some capacity.
I would completely agree. Not much to add.
Let me follow up on that. One of the critical components I've heard is the right team. Can you describe what are the ingredients for a successful entrepreneur? Is it being a Kellogg graduate? Is it having been successful on ventures before? Is it being super smart, tenacious, a little bit desperate, a little bit crazy? What are sort of characteristics that you look for and say, this guy's got it?
Looking at the good entrepreneurs that I've seen, I think there's a variety of mixes of talents and skills and personalities that can succeed. Having said that, I think passion is a really big one. I think the ability to and the character to persevere when the going gets tough is a consistent trait. And then I think the last one is what Tod referenced, which is kind of an insight into a market and a way to think about a market that perhaps doesn't conform with the standard view, and the ability to look a step or two further than what the average person sees in that market. So I'd say those three things are reasonably consistent in the good ones that I've seen in my limited experience. There's some other traits that are often there, but I think the personality is a little bit more flexible.
I would probably add that it's probably also the evolution. At least that's what we kind of call, like at Bacchus, where the parents you never had, right? In the sense that, with some of the winemakers / owners, there comes a point when they need to let go of certain things. And I say, you're just too big just to worry about this graduated cylinder. Granted, you got the palate for it. That's why you're where you're at. But there comes a point when the company gets to a certain size where you need to say, do you have good people there below you? And can you get to kind of where you need to get to the next stage? Because there's no way that you can be great at 1 million cases. You can be probably pretty great at 50 to 100,000 cases and have your kind of touch on it and everything else. But have you kind of built the team? And it's that evolution. And that's really difficult for entrepreneurs, and I know for winemakers at least, because they tend to be a little bit more right-brained. They're kind of a little more touchy-feely. Hey, I'll be honest. I couldn't blend wine if you put a gun in my head. But I've been at the tables where I tasted 5 different things, and he just goes, all of a sudden he just goes, and you drink, you kind of go, I paid $20 for that. And we just paid $6 for all those. That's a good return. I like that. Right? You know what I mean? But it's difficult to kind of let people go because they see their business. And I, when I was a GM at Bonnie Doon, we were at 160,000 cases. And I remember telling the owner, I said, listen, your 1 month's sales is equal to what your full year was 10 years ago. You're flying a different organization now. You can't be the guy that does this, this, and this. If you tell me that you want to go drive in the vineyards and have a good time, hey, listen, it's your company. You can do what you want. But just know that you're not your added value, because at a certain point, as a consumer product good, the public needs to see you, and they want to join your wine club because of you, and you. So it's a little bit of that evolution and kind of finding. That's what we think that we add to the table as a fund, is helping you change a little bit to say, it's okay, the business is running well. You need to do what you need to do, which is kind of manage and lead people. So.
I'd actually like to come back to somebody asked about is, are they Kellogg grads or what are the backgrounds? And
Kellogg grad, that was the answer I was looking for.
So, just to be a little provocative here among our friends, I'd like to throw out that, first of all, I'm talking about the founder. So there's a difference between the founder and then maybe the founder's operating partner. But the founders tend to be a little crazy in the traditional thinking of why would you do the 6th search engine? Google.
Yeah.
Why would you sell Pez containers online, eBay. Everybody thought these things were crazy. Oh, come on, people, social network, that's a joke, okay? So there tends to be a entrepreneur who has an insight that is so far kind of ahead of the norm that they are conservative. I'll also add one thing that might throw you. They typically have no reason to be successful in that space. They've never done it before. In the old world, we look at software companies like, okay, you came out of a Fortune 500 company, or you sold to the Fortune 500 companies, and therefore you've done these 7 things, and now you'll be a good entrepreneur to do it again. But look at the startups that have been really successful. Phil Knight out of Stanford Business School selling waffle shoes turns into Nike. Howard Schultz used to sell blenders. He built Starbucks. Pierre Omidyar was a software guy, had no background in selling goods to consumers. You just go through all these big breakout companies. Steve Jobs clearly had no experience to do what he was doing, and neither did Bill Gates. So it tends to be, the big ideas tend to be people who are just they have an insight, and they're so motivated, and they're so driven to get there, but they usually can't do it by themselves. So this is where the Kellogg piece comes in, is that usually these things are created and founded with some brilliance, and they have a team, a partner team, and they can attract great people. That's the other thing we look for, is can this person, no matter how wacky they are or kind of out there, are they smart enough and motivating enough to bring in good people? And there tends to be, in most big success stories, the founder who we all talk about, and then a team of 3 or 4 people who are just rock stars, who get the stuff done, who may be more classically trained, may have experience. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, hedge fund guy, why should he have built that? He had a brilliant idea, but he staffed it with people from Walmart and really bright people from all over. So I just want to throw out that mix. And the last thing I'll throw out is what we often see as a characteristic. The common characteristic is they are brilliant in some way. They may not be brilliant in SATs, but they're brilliant in the way they think about things and the way they develop product. And they can change and iterate as the challenges come at them. So I haven't seen a big successful business be business school in a business plan, where people just sit there and say, what are we going to do? It's usually somebody saying, I'm going to go do that, and it's a little crazy. So,
and I think the trend's probably even more.
But as you point out, I'm more consumer-rated, so that's.
But even in the enterprise, so I look at 2 of the companies we're most excited about in our portfolio, obviously Facebook and a company called Box.net, and both are run by college dropouts, both 28. It's a little scary getting outrun by these guys in boardrooms, but in each case there is a COO there, Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, and then Dan Levin from Intuit over at Fox. And I think in the old days, when it was companies selling to enterprises, where you were looking for kind of the experienced stature person who could sell to a Fortune 500 account, the founder might have been pushed more back to a technical route. Yeah. But now everything's so product focused. So if you look at Box or Yammer, the real vision from the CEO is kind of understanding this consumerization of the enterprise, and it's kind of the feel of the product. And you can almost backfill the business element, where before we might have been backfilling the product side. We're seeing it on the enterprise side as well. It's brand new in the last 3 years.
I'll just finish on this thought, and I think it's worth spending a little extra time because it's about people, and we're all trying to figure out where we fit the ecosystem. I think too many people are trying to be the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg. There are very few of those people. Across all the humans on Earth, how many people have done that? But there's a lot more people who've been part of these teams and been really important parts of these teams. And so if you find what you do well and partner with that other thing or other things, it broadens the net so much bigger than trying to be the next amazing founder. You might jump on a company that's doing $15 million a year and think, oh, it's late stage. Next thing you know, you're talking to George, and he's investing in when you're doing $100 million a year. And so I just would want to encourage that.
I think those guys, Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, weren't trying to be someone else. They were successful because they were trying to be themselves. So I think that's part of the critical ingredient is find what you're excellent at, find where your brilliance comes in.
I probably can add to that too. Definitely in the wine space, it's definitely the same way, right? I mean, the winemaker is the winemaker. And you got to just know that. And even within our fund, we jokingly say that we need to put an adult in charge. If you look at all of our investments, there's always the winemaker or the founder, right? But there's always a guy in the back that always runs the stuff. We always talk to him. Why? Because you're investing money. At the end of the day, you want $1 million from me? You want $2 million? You want $10 million from me? Man, you know what? I want to know that there's someone in the back that can actually help me figure out kind of what you're kind of sort of thinking. That particular individual also needs to be able to trust, and this is why I tell people that the great wine companies, you can look at them, right? Ravenswood had, Joel Peterson, but he also had Walter Reed, Justin Fagioli, Harvard grad. You look at Tod, sold for a lot of money. I worked for him, but his old man is a Harvard grad, right? There's also there's a business sort of component to it, because if you're going to grow your business and not just be a mom and pop and want a little bit further, you're going to need that piece. And I think all of us, you know what I mean? Like, I make wine, but I made wine originally when I made wine. The only reason why I made it was because I want to make wine. I want to know what these guys do. What's bracking? What's filtering? You know what I mean? Now I make wine. Unfortunately, I drank the Kool-Aid, and now I'm making wine. But originally I made it primarily because I wanted to know what they're doing. So when they're saying, hey, we need another racking, do you really need another racking? You've racked it once already. 3 rackings? That's a lot of rackings. Because that means that you're taking all the wines in the barrel, moving it to another barrel, right? And you're just taking the top that doesn't have the sediment on the bottom. But unless I've done it before, I don't know what racking means. I don't know what verasion means. I don't know what these pieces mean. So but the ones that are successful have this really kind of interesting sort of trust relationship between the guy that's the winemaker and the finance guy. And it's a very difficult sort of balance. And if they don't believe and trust each other, it caves in really fast, and it caves in more than it doesn't. Because the guy says, why do you need to spend $1,000 for barrels? I know guys spend $1,000 for barrels because it makes it taste better. $1,000 for barrels is really expensive. Why do you guys spend $1,000 per barrel, right? You can almost hear the conversation, right? But if you trust a little bit, and he kind of goes, you know what? Let me see what a $1,000 barrel tastes like. This is an $800 barrel. This is an $900 barrel. This is actually a $1,500 barrel. Want to taste those quick? I go, yeah, sure. I'll taste them all the time. All day. I go and I go, you know what? I don't know if I get 3 times the value or 1.5 times the value of this, but if we're selling for $150, $1,500, baby, right? But if you're selling it for $100, then all of a sudden they get it. It's kind of a relationship between the two people. One is the artist, and then one's the business guy. So you gotta have to know your spot, right? And listen, I know I'll never be a great winemaker in my lifetime, but you know what? I'll probably back a lot of really good people. So
that's a great comment. Right? There's an artist and there's a business guy. And you also made the comment about having an adult. I've heard that phrase used before.
In charge.
So I want to ask about that. How do venture capitalists step in? Do you nominate the adults? Do you give us a little bit of feel of what the structure of these transactions look like? Do you ask for seats on the board typically? Do you usually get involved in strategic decisions? Do you give us a little bit of understanding of, once you've seen a pitch and liked it, what's the relationship between the VC and the startup?
When you start early and we'll just progress through the stages.
So I think at the very early stages, it varies based on the type of value we think we can add in that particular situation. Some very, very early seed investments, we don't take board seats. We may be very, very actively involved or not, and those are generally convertible notes, really early, first money in. I think as you move further down the spectrum, especially towards the Series A, it is generally trying to get a board seat or make sure someone on the investors syndicate has it. But it's important to realize that it's a board seat. It's not control. At the end of the day, I think good venture capitalists are very effective advisors, and they work well with people they invest in to both give them perspective that perhaps they don't have, having it be their first startup or not having seen the numbers that you guys have seen over your careers and the lesson you've learned. So it's really an advisory relationship, and I think that's the important part. And the legal side of what rights and the board seat, people pay a lot of attention to it, but I think it's probably secondary in importance.
As you move to Series A and Series B, you should definitely expect for your investor to have the board seat, because the amount of capital going in and the ownership generally warrants that, or it's expected. So a Series A round would often have, let's say, or a Series B, by the time your Series B might be 2 investors on the board, 2 from common, maybe an independent. So that's something to think about. As far as what board members do, I agree with everything David just said. And then I just add that we often are just good to bounce ideas off of, and also good to help on recruiting and team observations. We don't put people in, but we might have the discussion, initiate the discussion of how about adding someone with this skill set. I will help you with the recruiting, or let's take that off we can help take that off your plate. But I have never seen a board that is running the company, and if it is, that's a really dangerous thing. You really want to back the team and believe in the team, and that the board is your sounding board more than anything else. At least that's what I've seen to be.
Yeah, no, I concur with everything. We get in Series C or later, take board seats about half the time, observer seats the remainder. And companies are working, and we like the teams and the strategy, so something really has to derail for things to get contentious. So mainly where they're supportive, we're helping the companies trying to scale. So if we're getting in at the 10 to 20 to $30 million run rate, we've seen a lot of companies get to the $100+ million revenue run rate. So the pattern recognition of those learnings, we can oftentimes offer that up, or even put portfolio companies, management teams in touch with one another, as opposed to us, kind of translating what happened. Why don't you speak to Jerry Kennelly at Riverbed, who did that? For the most part, I think we're all just trying to support the teams and not try to operate the businesses.
If it's a debt deal for us, then I have observation rights on the board. So I just kind of go and I listen. If I do give advice, I've already been trained by my lawyer what to say. I've seen other people. There have been other people. Let me give you an example of a couple other people, right? So that's a little bit more, I got to be hands off, right? But if you ask for my opinion, you'll definitely get it. On the ones that we're doing an equity deal, there are 3, and for us, there's usually we have control. Primarily because I don't want to necessarily run your business, but because there needs to be an event, and because they're smaller deals, right? We need to have that control, and the liquidity potential is a lot smaller because so we got to start working on that, probably year 3 or 4, right? And kind of figuring if we exit on 5 or 6. So that's why we'll probably have 3 out of the 5 board seats, and that has been an issue with a lot of the wineries that we work with, because all of a sudden, so there has to be an issue, and so a lot of times it's, you're not doing so well, give me the keys. I'm driving for the next couple of years. But in 2-3 years from now, you're going to get the keys back, and you either buy us back out, or you find another partner. So there's kind of.
Do you set milestones? Is there typical with venture funding? Is there some milestones or commitments that you expect to see to know when to jump in to get the keys? Are there sort of some obligations?
Yeah, we put in some pretty interesting. Some people would call it draconian, they call it draconian, but just some milestones. If I start seeing the business going south, I want to know why. Granted, the wine business is lumpy, as we call it, right? We measure things every month, by the month, but really, in reality, and since it's on video, I probably shouldn't say, but we measure it really by the quarter. If you can give me by the quarter, I'm actually pretty cool. But if you miss 2 months in a row, 3rd month, you bet you're going to get a phone call from me saying, "Hey, listen, what are the depletions looking on? Why are people not picking up? Why are wine club signups not coming? Why are visitors shut down? Who's not selling? I want to know these things, right?" And then all of a sudden, the adult in charge just kind of goes, "Well, because of these reasons." And if I'm okay with it, the general partner say, "Hey, and the question is, do you still have confidence in the management, Quinton?" That's the question they asked me. I've been asked that several times. I said, "You know what? These guys are doing the right thing. The business is just difficult, primarily because the distributors are not picking up." And then they'll be like, "Okay, got it. Next." Right? But it's a value call that I need to make a lot of times. So that's kind of what we do.
Any milestones you set for early stage, or commitments you expect with the venture capital?
Generally not in our case, but it would be case by case. It'd be hard to do a generalization.
Okay. All right. So I want to hear some stories. Give us your best and worst investment, and tell us why. There's got to have been at least 1 or 2 happenings. So please share.
Well, I'll kick off because my answer is easy. Having only been here for a year, I'm not sure I've got enough perspective to have best and worst. I've got exciting. They're all best at the moment. So few years from now, it'll be a different story.
Actually, a perfect time, right?
Exactly.
Since we're a first-time fund, we've been knock on wood. The best investment, of course, has been Cameron Hughes, primarily because he paid us back. You gotta love that, right? The other four that we got, it's a TBD. As for worst, like I mentioned about working on this deal for 9 months, right? You know what I mean? And all of a sudden we do a background check on the guy, and the guy, we already gave him a pass once. He had a bankruptcy, right? Okay, hey, listen, it's America. You can get a pass, baby, right? You know what I mean? But you don't tell me after I sit in front of you, telling you, bleeding out our souls a little bit about trust and listen. It's not about damage control. It's about being open and honest. And then I find something different. That's a problem, right? That's when we shut the deal. That's when we shut the process down after putting 9 months of coddling, whatever you want to call it, right? Calling the guy on a regular basis. He's more on my phone than anybody else to call every 2 weeks. Hey, what's going on? You know what I mean? And all of a sudden it dies. But you got to be able to pull the plug and say, listen, I can't contort to a deal and potentially figure out how not and how to get beat up. You just got to figure out, because we looked at one deal that recently they completely unwind the thing. If we looked at it, we really wanted to do the deal because it would have been a big splash for the fund. We would have been part of these guys. You know what? They just folded. And all of a sudden, when the general partners asked me, "Why aren't we doing these deals?" Remember that one we passed on? I just saved you $7 million. Then all of a sudden, it becomes a little bit different conversation. So that's what that worked out.
Okay. So in terms of deals that really backfired, as a late stage guy, you're not supposed to lose money on deals, and I had the privilege of doing that twice in 1 year, my very first year in the business. They say in the venture side, the two most expensive people to train are Air Force, fighter jet pilots and venture capitalists, because they can each blow up 30 million. Pretty quickly. Unfortunately, I guess an anecdote behind that story. But it was 2000, and people had a lot of confidence in anything they touched, and we were working with these really exciting entrepreneurs, and they were capital-intensive businesses. And then when the bubble burst, people started to really care about capital efficiency, and unfortunately, these businesses just weren't going to be able to make that transition, so we made the tough call of closing them down. The more fun one to talk about is in terms of winners. Our firm, as I've mentioned before, was in Facebook, and I think it's an exciting, kind of interesting story because it shows you how much luck goes behind this business. Susie, you were talking about when you're at Chevron, you have all these data points, but we actually had spent a lot of time with the management team over at MySpace, and had wrapped up a deal to do the late stage round for MySpace. The management team there, the two Chris's, were very excited to work with us. They wanted the capital to grow the business. Unfortunately, they had a strange ownership structure where there was a company called Intermix, a holding company that owned MySpace, and they wanted to sell the entity against the management team's wishes to News Corp. And unfortunately, there we are with our term sheet that's kind of been accepted but not signed, and the team starts going radio silent on us. And finally, we kind of showed up at their office unannounced and said, "What's going on?" And they explained this M&A deal. So we said, "Hey, that's bittersweet. Congratulations for you guys, but not so great for us." So there we were with a lot of knowledge around what 18-year-olds were doing with the internet, and we're all in our 40s. And so, we said, hey, let's go back, let's find the next best one in space. And there was this company, Facebook. Team had relatively recently moved out to Palo Alto. And so, we headed over there and, met with the team. It was clear that our 11 o'clock meeting was their first meeting of the day. The head was alive and well, and we were just blown away with the vision from the management team. We were thinking about it as a message board for college kids that was getting a lot of usage. They were using terms like social graph that we kind of nodded and were trying to feign understanding. And we decided to lean in. And There were a couple of reasons behind it, but a lot of people thought we were crazy at the time. I can show you our internal memos. I mean, we thought, our best case scenario here is a 3 to 4x return. And so it just shows how difficult the business is.
It's a good one, though.
That's hard to follow.
All right. We'll give you a pass if you want it.
I'm happy to talk about it. That's probably the greatest story in venture capital. So our worst investment is that we didn't do Facebook, and we didn't do a bunch of companies we were aware of. Now, our fund wasn't formed at the time to have done the early round. It would have been within our zone, or 10 times our normal zone. But I think the biggest challenge is you see some companies, you have an instinct that it could be good, but it might not fit the criteria of what your fund is set up for. And we have a number of companies that we have deep regrets about not being part of because we saw them and they were just at a different stage than what our fund was structured for. And so the opportunities missed are my greatest pain points right now. But the company I'm really proud of, it may not be our biggest return driver, but is when we backed Blue Nile in 1998, two guys walked in and said, we want to sell diamonds online. And at the time, people didn't buy very much online at all. It actually might have been 97. And they certainly would never consider buying diamonds online. But these guys had a vision that diamonds are painful to buy, jewelry stores are rip-offs, and all these things can be compared against each other, and it can be dramatically improved for the customer experience. And we backed two people who had absolutely no experience to do so, to take on a jewelry business. They were just smart, really smart people out of Bain Consulting. And the company went on to become one of the largest diamond sellers in the world today, and a very big outcome for us. And I'm proud of it because we backed them. It was a crazy idea with a team that really didn't make sense that they'd be successful, but we sensed that they would be successful because they were so smart and they were so innovative, and just to stay with them. And probably the thing I'm most proud of is when the market crashed in 2001, this company went from a valuation of $250 million on its previous round to where we couldn't get the next round done. And
we looked at it and said, selling jewelry online.
So since no one would touch it, we stepped up and led that next round, and I was really pleased to be part of backing a team when nobody else would back them. And even the insiders weren't all on board, and getting the insiders to participate, and then the company going on to be successful. So that's probably the company I'm most proud of because of the challenges they faced and the stage at which we invested.
That's a great story. Let me ask a little bit about exit strategies. We haven't talked about that, and I assume that was one of the things you look at when you look at a potential venture. Any observations, insights there? What are things that companies can do to increase the likelihood of a good exit strategy? Or what mistakes can they avoid, perhaps? Any thoughts on that?
Focus on I'm like a broken record, I really apologize. Focus on a great product, a great customer experience, heads down, build the business, and that's what builds value, as does great technology and great team. That's what builds value. That's what Google wants to buy, and Facebook wants to buy, and Microsoft wants to buy, is they want to buy either an awesome team or a group that has nailed a category in a way that they couldn't. But that's just kind of a general way. There's lots of tactics that you can do to make yourself attractive.
I don't think you can force the outcome. You just want to focus on continuing to add value over time by building a great business. And some of the tactics are, if there's a partnership ecosystem that can make sense where some of the potential buyers over time can get a sneak preview of your business and start a dialogue. Sometimes those relationships can lead into an unsolicited offer that sparks a process, or a lot of times now companies are filing to go public to force the hand of potential buyers. So a lot of tactics out there, but at the end of the day, just building a great business will give you a lot of options.
I'll actually share one perspective from a guy who's in the business of M&A that I thought was really good perspective. He said that the day you start your business is the day you start networking and talking with your competitors, because you just don't know what will happen. So get to know them in a friendly manner, in a non-threatening way. And 4 years down the road, it could be that special dinner. He used the example of a dinner in Houston that leads to a really productive M&A, because these two companies realized they were better with each other than competing against each other. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about that until they need to sell, and then it's too late. So the idea of getting to know your ecosystem and who your potential partners can be all the way through your company's progress can yield tremendous benefits down the road.
I think George said something about it's very expensive or difficult to train a venture capitalist. When we did a survey before the meeting, some folks said that they were interested in potentially becoming VCs. Any advice there and career guidance? You all came to a very different route, so thanks for sharing that. But any advice, don't do it, or what kind of skills help a person? What kind of characteristics or skills do you think are important in VC?
Sure, I'll start. It's different. After operating something for a really long time, someone asked me, he goes, "Hey, how's your job?" And I was like, "Well, it's a little different. Now I just kind of advise and I kind of get people to kind of do stuff, right?" So if you come from an operating background, you need to actually be okay with letting go a little bit, right? I mean, I would come back from some meetings thinking, these guys are idiots. This is how I would do it. It's kind of like, okay, Quinton, how are we going to get them to think your way, right? You know what I mean? Because it's not necessarily it's purely your will. Because if it was purely your will, you'd be running the company yourself and doing it yourself. So I think that that's a really big thing if it's if you're from an operating background. I think that a lot more funds, and this is just my take, at least from the niche side, is that they're looking for operators. You got to bring something to the table, right? The money guys already know the money stuff, right? But if you can come in and be saying, "This is what I can do," and if this company, if these, and especially with the niche fund, you're able to say, if it doesn't work, guess who you're going to drop in for 6 months to run this place? Not me, right? Then all of a sudden, then you're ahead of the crowd. Because I know that when I interviewed for my job, right, I was running a winery, right, and I had a kind of finance background from 20 years ago. But I beat out 3 candidates in front of me because I was the last guy they interviewed. But they said, "We need Quinton on the team." I crushed everyone out. I know those guys. They're my friends, right? But they didn't have an operating and a finance background, so it kind of worked in my favor. So I think that you just need to kind of figure out, maybe research the fund a little bit, who are the guys that are there, and kind of what do you bring to the table? Do you look like them, or do you bring something, or do you look like them a little bit, just enough where they get comfortable with you, but they kind of know that you're not some weird operator road guy that's just going to go crazy on it one day. So I think there's a little bit of that balance. That's my take.
Someone who just joined, I think that last point really resonates, which is looking at your background and your skills and your perspective, and then looking for a unique situation where it's a good match. It's not real actionable advice, but I think different venture firms at different points have different needs, and finding that one-off match is the key.
I'll throw out one perspective. First of all, I don't think venture is necessarily a great profession for a lot of people. I love it because we get to be around entrepreneurs every day and live that energy vicariously and have a portfolio. But there's the downsides are you already heard the numbers. We meet with hundreds of companies and we say no most of the time. That's not really fun. I mean, you can go home during the day and just met with 5 companies in which you're not moving forward with any of them and think, well, what did I just accomplish today? So what I see a lot of people who are metric-driven, operating-driven have trouble with venture because it's about building long-term relationships. Like right now, George and I, in a way, are building a relationship and everybody on this panel, I'm hoping that I can move a company into his portfolio sometime. It's very subtle. It takes time.
25 million more now.
Yeah. And I haven't met David before. This could be a very important relationship. We want to work with angel people. My point is it can be long-term relationship building. It's a very different business than living on a weekly or quarterly forecast. And so that's something to recognize. But here's what I think the question you have to ask about venture is, if you're sitting at a table across from an entrepreneur, what do you bring to the table? Why will they work with you over anybody else they can go to? In the old days, it was proprietary deal flow. Today's world with the internet, any entrepreneur can get to anybody, virtually. So what do you have that has unique perspective, unique experience that makes that entrepreneur value you enough that they want to work with you? Now I'm referring to a Series A investment stage. It's a little different at the different stages. And so typically the answer to that is having either been in an important company in that space and seen the movie a little bit before, or having been an entrepreneur and know what it's like to build a company, or having made some just awesome investments, of which that ecosystem is important to this company. And generally, I'd say today, it's a little different than before, but I think being in the flow of the new young entrepreneurs is really critical. Whereas before you could kind of analyze your way into a lot of this stuff. Now you've got to be in the flow. They have so many options that being in the flow with relevant experience is the way to be successful in this business.
I'll ask one more question, but I want to make sure I leave time for you guys to ask questions. Give us an outlook. What does 2012 look like? And specifically, any views on the Jobs Act and crowdfunding? Is that going to impact venture capital going forward? Any particular sectors that you think will be better or weaker in the next 12, 18 months?
Well, I'll lead off just on the outlook. I mean, I think one of the things that we're really excited about right now is I've been around startups since 1989, and I've never seen as many really good companies, and the percentage of companies that are working just seems like a record high as well. So, I mean, it's part of the disconnect that we all see when we read the Wall Street Journal and the global, the national news, and at the same time we've all got traffic heading to this place because the area it's humming right now. And I think there's some real reasons why in terms of fundamental shifts in cloud computing, in mobile, the internet's reach now is so different than it was in 2000. Just so many reasons behind all that. So, I mean, all that's very positive. I think on a, kind of flip side of that is things have been going really well for a few years now in terms of valuations and capital flow in the business. And I think that we could be seeing some signs of a pause potentially. Obviously the stock markets recently have been a little tough. The Facebook IPO wasn't received like a lot of people thought it would be received. If you look at dollar flows that venture capitalists, look at over the last 3 years, venture capitalists have invested $24 billion a year into companies, but we've only raised $16 billion a year into our funds. And at some point in time, those lines have to connect. And I think the LP world that funds the venture funds is more representative of that national world. And so, I think there could be some things that cause a little bit more restraint than what we've been seeing recently. But the great thing about this business is you just never know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great underlying drivers for entrepreneurs and technology startups today. You mentioned the cloud, we've got mobile, we've got internet. There's never been a more efficient time to reach millions and even billions, in your case, customers. And so that's really exciting. I think it's really a phenomenal time to be in this business and entrepreneurship. The downside, so we're very positive on innovation. The downsides are lots of companies are getting funded. 3,000 companies a year are getting funded. So what are any company's odds of success? It's actually extremely low. But the upside of those successful companies is extremely high, is kind of the way we think about it. So whether the markets are hot or not hot, great companies will always create value, and some of the greatest companies are built in tough times. And one last thing I'll say is that today is really great to see we have so many wealthy companies like Oracle and Facebook and Google, Microsoft. I mean, there's actually a very long list that are looking for talent and looking for innovation. So it provides more outcome opportunities today than we had 10 years ago.
I'm going to stop us now because I want to make sure that I don't keep you guys too late. I do want to thank very much for the panel and opportunity this evening. Thank you so much.